It's gone.
Just like that.
As of Thursday, February 12th, 2026, the legal bedrock that has supported, well, essentially every major climate action in the United States for the last 17 years has been revoked.
And we really need to be clear about what we mean by bedrock.
Right. And I want to be clear right off the top here. We aren't talking about a single rule regarding fuel efficiency for, a sedan. We aren't talking about a specific tax on light bulbs or a subsidy for solar panels.
No, this is much bigger.
We are talking about the foundation. We are talking about the endangerment finding.
It's the scientific determination that greenhouse gases actually threaten public health. It is the trigger that allows the government to do anything at all about climate change.
And the administration has just pulled that trigger mechanism right out of the gun.
It's a profound change.
The president and the administrator of the EPA, Lee Zeldin, are calling this the largest deregulatory action in American history.
That's the phrase they're using.
They're framing it as a total liberation of the economy.
Yeah.
But there is a massive amount of detail to unpack here. I mean, we have to look at the legal arguments, the health fallout, and this very strange economic paradox where regulations are disappearing, but your utility bills are actually skyrocketing.
It is a chaotic moment, and the implications are going to be felt everywhere, from the courtrooms to the emergency rooms.
Welcome to Meteorology Matters, the podcast that dives deep into the science, chaos, and stories behind the weather that shapes our world. This show was created by meteorologist Rob Jones. Now let's get into today's episode of Meteorology Matters.
This is a heavy one. We need to start by really, really deeply understanding what just happened on Thursday.
Right, let's strip away the political jargon for a second. The endangerment finding. It sounds like the title of a suspense movie or maybe a thriller novel.
It does have that ring to it.
But it's actually a specific document from 2009. So why was this thing so important that removing it is considered a historic event? Why is this the bedrock?
Okay, so think of the endangerment finding as a kind of a medical diagnosis for the atmosphere.
A diagnosis, I like that.
Back in 2009, the EPA didn't just guess. They didn't just wake up one morning and decide they wanted to regulate something new.
Oh.
They looked at over 200 pages of peer-reviewed scientific evidence. They analyzed the chemistry. They analyzed the physics. They looked at all the public health data that was available at the time. And based on all of that, they made a formal legal determination.
So this is a rigorous checkup, not just a quick glance.
The most rigorous checkup possible under the law. And the conclusion was that greenhouse gases, we're talking specifically about carbon dioxide, methane, a few others, that they accumulate in the atmosphere and threaten the public health and welfare of current and future generations.
So it was the official government acknowledgement written down that, yes, this stuff is bad for us.
Exactly. And legally, that diagnosis is what authorized the cure, or at least the treatment.
Right.
This is the crucial part to understand about the Clean Air Act. The way that law is written, once the EPA determines something is a pollutant that endangers people, they are required by law to regulate it.
They don't have a choice.
They don't have a choice. It's a mandate. That finding was the legal foundation for everything, for limiting emissions from cars, from power plants, from oil and gas wells.
Yeah.
Without the finding, the EPA literally does not have the authority to act on greenhouse gases.
So by revoking the finding, they aren't just rolling back a specific law. They are saying, legally speaking, the patient isn't sick anymore.
Or maybe more accurately, they're saying the diagnosis was wrong from the start. They are scrubbing the medical chart. The president explicitly called the original finding a radical rule and the basis for a Green New Scam. So you can see this isn't just a policy shift. It is a complete rejection of the scientific consensus that established the risk in the first place.
And the person leading the charge here is Lee Zeldin, the administrator of the EPA. He stood there on Thursday and said this move drives a dagger through the heart of the previous climate agenda.
Which is a fascinating choice of words, isn't it? A dagger through the heart. And honestly, it is a fascinating turn of events for Zeldin personally.
How so? I know he's been in politics for a while, but was he always on this side of the issue? I mean, this feels pretty extreme.
Well, no. And that's what's so interesting. If you look back at his time in Congress, when he was representing Long Island from 2019 to 2023, the record is actually quite different.
Really?
He was a member of the Climate Solutions Caucus.
I've heard of that. That's a bipartisan group, right? Republicans and Democrats trying to find common ground.
Exactly. It's supposed to be the place for moderates to work on these issues. And even more specifically, the voting record shows he specifically voted against amendments that would have blocked the EPA from using this very endangerment finding.
Wait. So you're saying he voted to protect this finding before he decided to drive a dagger through its heart?
The records certainly suggest that. It's a clear reversal. The shift really became apparent when he ran for governor of New York in 2022.
Okay.
During that campaign, he pivoted hard. He started talking about accelerating natural gas drilling. And now, as the head of the very agency he once voted to empower on this issue, he's executing a maneuver that he once opposed. It really highlights how the political winds have shifted the regulatory landscape.
It's a complete 180-degree turn. So let's talk about the justification here, because they can't just say, we don't like it. Administratively, they have to give a reason, a legal rationale.
They do.
And the administration is throwing out some huge numbers regarding the economy.
They are. The headline number is that this revocation will save the American auto industry and other businesses an estimated $1.3 trillion.
That is a number with a T? Trillion. Where's that math coming from? Because that sounds like a number you pull it out of a hat.
That's the big question, isn't it? They haven't actually released the breakdown of that $1.3 trillion figure.
So no one's seen the worksheet?
No. It's a headline number. It's very effective for a press release. But the general argument is that by removing the requirement for auto manufacturers to meet strict emissions standards and by removing the limits on power plants, you dramatically lower the cost of doing business. You remove the red tape, as they always call it.
Okay, so that's the economic pitch. But there is also a legal argument they're using, right? It's not just about the money. They're trying to redefine how the Clean Air Act works entirely.
Yes, and this is where it gets a little technical, but it's incredibly important for understanding the future of environmental law in this country.
Lay it on us.
The administration is arguing that the Clean Air Act was only ever meant to cover direct harm near the source of the pollution.
Direct harm. Okay, unpack that for me. What does that mean in practice?
Think about the classic pollutants. Think about soot. Or smog, or lead particles from gasoline back in the day.
Things you can see and smell.
Right. You have a factory, smoke comes out of a smokestack, and the people living right next door get sick, they cough, their kids get asthma. That is direct, local harm. The pollution is right there, and the victim is right there.
Okay, that makes sense for old school pollution.
Yeah.
Like the London fog or, smog in Los Angeles in the 70s. You could see it, you could smell it, and if you moved 10 miles away, you were basically fine.
Exactly. But greenhouse gases don't work like that. Carbon dioxide doesn't just hang around the tailpipe of your car.
No, it goes everywhere.
It mixes globally. It creates a blanket effect around the entire planet. It doesn't matter if the CO2 comes from a tailpipe in Detroit or a factory in Beijing or a massive bushfire in Australia. It all goes into the same global atmosphere and traps heat everywhere.
And the administration is saying that because it mixes globally, the EPA shouldn't regulate it. Is that the argument?
Precisely. They are arguing that because the damage isn't strictly local or near the source, it falls outside the scope of what the EPA was built to do. It is a very, very narrow interpretation of the law, one that seems designed specifically to exclude climate change from federal oversight.
It effectively creates a loophole the size of the atmosphere itself.
That's a good way to put it.
It's like saying, if I poison the town well, it's not a crime because I didn't personally hand a cup of water to the specific person who drank it.
Oh.
But looking at the research we have, this isn't just a dry legal maneuver. It feels like an ideological declaration. I mean, the president referred to climate scientists as stupid people and reiterated the idea that this is all a hoax.
And that is the core of it. We're now seeing a government policy that is directly at odds with the conclusions of the vast, vast majority of global scientists. It's a stance that says, fundamentally, we dispute the physics.
Right.
And that brings us to the health reality, because you can repeal a law, but as we know in meteorology, you absolutely cannot repeal physics.
Let's unpack that physics and biology aspect, because one of the arguments we heard this week came from the Interior Secretary, Doug Burgum.
Yes.
He went on TV and made a claim that sounds, well, on the surface, interesting. He said, quote, CO2 was never a pollutant. When we breathe, we emit CO2. Plants need CO2 to survive and grow. They thrive with more CO2.
Yes. The old CO2 is plant food argument.
It's a classic talking point.
It is. And it sounds intuitive, doesn't it? It has a kernel of truth that makes it seem plausible.
It does. I mean, is he wrong? I remember photosynthesis from grade school. Plants do take in carbon dioxide. It's a part of the cycle of life.
He isn't wrong that plants use CO2. That is a basic biological fact. But it's a massive logical fallacy to suggest that because something is natural or even necessary in small amounts, it must be harmless in massive, unprecedented amounts.
It's like water. Right.
Right.
We need water to survive, but you can still drown in it.
Exactly. That's the perfect analogy. Or think about vitamins. You need iron in your blood to transport oxygen. It's essential. But if you take an entire bottle of iron supplements, it becomes toxic and can kill you.
The dose makes the poison.
The dose makes the poison, and the scientific reality, which is backed by that mountain of research the EPA originally used, is that the extraordinarily high levels of atmospheric CO2 we have now are overwhelming the natural processes. It's not just about the plants. It's about the heat-trapping mechanism in the atmosphere.
Right, the greenhouse effect.
You can have all the lush plants you want, but if the average temperature spikes to a point where those plants and the people who depend on them can't survive the heat waves, the plant food argument falls apart pretty quickly. It completely ignores the larger system in which the plants live.
So let's look at what happens when that heat-trapping mechanism gets cranked up. The Environmental Defense Fund released some data on what this repeal specifically means for our health over the next 30 years. And the numbers are, well, they're grim.
They are startling. The projection is that repealing the endangerment finding will lead to a 10% increase in U.S. greenhouse gas emissions compared to where we would have been.
10%, that's not a small number.
Not at all. And that translates to very real human costs. The headline number is 58,000 additional premature deaths.
58,000. That's the size of a mid-sized American city, just gone. That's a stadium full of people.
And it's not just deaths, it's also 37 million more asthma attacks between now and 2055.
And someone with friends who have severe asthma, that number is terrifying. Just the anxiety of not being able to breathe, multiplied by 37 million instances, that is a lot of suffering.
And we are already seeing the precursors to this in the data. This isn't all just future projections. Deaths from extreme heat in the U.S. have already doubled in recent decades.
Doubled.
That's in the data today. That isn't a model. That is a retrospective look at what's already happened. And we are seeing the spread of diseases that we usually associate with the tropics.
I saw that in the notes, dengue fever. I usually think of that as something you worry about on a vacation to the equator, not here in the mainland U.S.
Yes. And last year, there were nearly 5,000 cases of dengue fever in U.S. travelers. That is a 30% rise. And here's the mechanism. It's very simple meteorology.
Okay.
As the climate gets wetter and warmer, the mosquito season gets longer. The winters don't get cold enough for long enough to kill off the larvae, and their habitable range expands northward. We are effectively creating a nursery for tropical diseases in the continental United States.
And then there's the smoke. We have all seen the orange skies in recent years. Right. It feels like every summer now, there's at least a week where the advice is just don't go outside.
Absolutely. The projections show that wildfire smoke exposure could kill as many as 70,000 Americans annually by 2050.
70,000 a year.
Every year. That is a direct consequence of a hotter, drier climate in the West that is fueling more intense, larger fires.
So when the administration says they are saving the economy money, the counter-argument is, what is the cost of 70,000 deaths a year? What is the cost of 37 million asthma attacks in terms of hospital visits and lost workdays? That costs the economy money too, right? Sick people can't work.
That is the fundamental disconnect. Katherine Hayhoe, who is the chief scientist at the Nature Conservancy, put out a statement that really nailed this.
What did she say?
She pointed out that the science underpinning the endangerment finding has only gotten stronger and more certain since 2009. These aren't just abstract ideas on a chalkboard. They are real, documented risks to our infrastructure, our economy, and our people, all rooted in rigorous, peer-reviewed evidence.
She called it the ostrich effect, didn't she?
Essentially, yes. She argues that revoking the legal finding doesn't change the chemistry of the atmosphere. It doesn't alter the laws of physics. It just makes the U.S. like an ostrich with its head in the sandless, able to see the disaster coming and, critically, less able to mitigate the floods, the fires, and the droughts. We are legally blinding ourselves to a very clear and present danger.
And while we are blinding ourselves to the danger, we are also being told that this is all for our benefit, specifically our wallets.
The pocketbook argument.
Right. The administration promised that these deregulations would slash utility bills. They campaigned on it. Drill, baby, drill was supposed to mean save, baby, save for the consumer.
But the data tells a completely different story, and this is where we get into what you call the economic paradox.
Okay, lay it on me. What is happening to our electric bills? Because I can tell you, mine certainly hasn't gone down.
They are going up significantly.
Yeah.
Between September 2024 and September 2025, electricity prices in the U.S. rose 5.1%.
5.1. And what was general inflation over that same period?
General inflation was around 3%, so energy costs are outpacing the cost of everything else, so rising much faster. And this is happening while the administration is pushing for maximum fossil fuel production.
So wait a minute. If we are producing more oil and gas than ever before in history, basic economic supply and demand suggests the price should go down. Why am I paying more to turn on my lights?
2 words. Liquefied natural gas.
LNG.
LNG.
Explain that connection. How does exporting gas make my bill go up here at home?
It's basic supply and demand, but on a global scale. In the past, U.S. natural gas was largely trapped here. It was cheap for us because we had so much of it and couldn't easily ship it overseas. It was a captive market, and American consumers benefited from that.
Right.
But now there is a massive push championed by the Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, to build export terminals and ship record amounts of that gas to Europe and Asia.
So we are putting our cheap gas on these huge tanker ships and sending it to the highest bidder globally.
Exactly. And when you link the U.S. market to the global market, our domestic price naturally rises to meet the higher global price. By exporting so much of our supply, we are tightening the domestic supply that's available for Americans.
We're competing with Europe for our own gas.
Precisely. The group Public Citizen analyzed this and found that U.S. households spent an extra $12 billion on natural gas because of this export boom.
$12 billion. That's money coming straight out of American pockets and going onto those tanker ships.
And Secretary Wright is actively pushing Europe to buy even more. He's asking them to cut their own methane rules so we can sell them more gas. It's a policy that is fantastic for gas producers. It helps their profit margins immensely, but it directly hurts the American ratepayer.
And then there is also this strange situation with coal. The administration loves coal. Beautiful clean coal, as the president calls it. They are fighting tooth and nail to keep these old plants open.
And this is another layer of the cost issue. Many of these coal plants are aging. They're 50, 60 years old. They're expensive to maintain. They're expensive to fuel compared to modern alternatives. But the administration is trying to force them to stay online.
Why?
Well, experts like Ari Pesco from Harvard Law and the science historian Naomi Oreskes are calling this blatant cronyism.
Because it just doesn't make economic sense.
No, it doesn't. Look at the numbers. In 2025, 93% of all new energy capacity added to the grid in the United States was solar, wind, and batteries.
93%.
Overwhelmingly. And why? Because they are cheaper. It is simply cheaper to build and operate a new wind farm or solar field than it is to keep many of these old coal plants running. So when the government forces those plants to stay open, they are effectively forcing you, the ratepayer, to subsidize inefficiency.
It's a transfer of wealth. You pay more on your bill so that a specific coal plant operator can stay in business.
Naomi Oreskes argues exactly that. She says it's a direct transfer of money from ratepayers to donors.
Speaking of donors, we have to follow the money here. The research we looked at mentions a very specific dinner at Mar-a-Lago.
Yes, this was back in April of 2024. The president hosted a group of oil and gas CEOs and, according to reports, explicitly asked for $1 billion in campaign contributions.
$1 billion.
Yeah.
That is a staggering ask. He's essentially said, give me $1 billion and I'll see what I can do for you on regulations.
He didn't get the full billion, but he did get about $75 million from that sector, which is still a massive amount of money. And this included large checks from fracking mogul Harold Hamm and coal CEO Joe Kraft.
Okay, so let's connect the dots. Harold Hamm, a fracking and LNG guy, wants to export more natural gas.
Yeah.
Joe Kraft, a coal guy, wants to keep his coal plants open. They donate millions of dollars. And then what happens? The administration blocks offshore wind projects, pushes for more LNG exports, and creates subsidies to keep old coal plants running.
The correlation is impossible to ignore. Even if those policies, like blocking wind energy or exporting our natural gas, result in higher prices for the average consumer, they align perfectly with the business interests of the specific people who wrote the checks.
It's amazing. We're told wind energy is a scam, yet the real scam might be you paying extra on your electricity bill every month to keep a 50-year-old coal plant on life support.
That is certainly the argument being made by critics, and it creates a very confusing, chaotic landscape for the industry itself. You might think big business is popping champagne corks right now because all these regulations are gone.
Right. Hooray, no more red tape.
But it is not that simple. Not at all.
Yeah, let's talk about that industry reaction, because I saw something that really surprised me. Tesla actually wrote to the administration urging them to keep the endangerment finding.
Right. Which seems counterintuitive until you think about it. Tesla's entire business model is built on the transition to electric vehicles. Their position is that the endangerment finding provided a stable, predictable regulatory platform. If you're going to invest billions of dollars in building gigafactories, you need to know that the government is going to continue to support that transition. Revoking the finding pulls the rug out from under them. It deprives consumers of choice, and it hurts the economic benefits of the entire EV sector.
So what about the traditional automakers? Ford, GM, the big guys? They must be happy.
They are in a really tough spot. The Alliance for Automotive Innovation, which is their main lobbying group, has been pretty quiet.
Why?
Because on one hand, they didn't love the very strict rules the previous administration put in place. They thought they were too aggressive. But on the other hand, what they fear more than anything is the patchwork.
The patchwork, what's that?
Imagine if every state has different rules. If the federal standard completely disappears, powerful states like California are going to step in and create their own.
And they have the market power to do that.
Exactly. California Governor Gavin Newsom has already promised to sue, saying we will see them in court. If California sets its own strict emissions rules, and then 12 or 13 other states that follow California's lead adopt them, but Texas and Florida and other states don't, how do you build a car for that market?
It's a logistical nightmare. You have to manufacture different versions of the same car depending on which side of a state line it's going to be sold on.
It's chaos. Automakers crave certainty. A single federal standard, even a tough one, is often better and more efficient for them than 50 different standards.
And then there is the oil and gas industry, the American Petroleum Institute, the API. You would think they'd be thrilled to have the EPA off their backs completely.
And they are when it comes to cars. They absolutely want to sell more gasoline. But surprisingly, Mike Summers, the head of the API, said they actually want federal regulation of methane.
Wait, the oil guys want to be regulated? Why? That seems completely counterintuitive.
It's pure strategy. The big players, your ExxonMobils, your Chevrons, they have already spent millions, probably billions of dollars on technology to stop methane leaks from their wells.
They've already made the investment.
They've made the investment. They want the government to enforce rules that force all their smaller, cheaper competitors to spend that money too. It levels the playing field for them and weeds out the little guys.
That is fascinating. So the big oil companies want regulation to crush the smaller ones, while the administration is trying to deregulate everything to help, well, who exactly?
To help the ideology, perhaps, or to help the specific donors who haven't yet made those investments. It creates this chaotic environment where the industry itself is completely fractured and sending mixed signals.
And meanwhile, the legal warfare is just getting started. You mentioned California is preparing to sue. Senator Chuck Schumer said the blast radius of this decision spans from San Diego to Portland, Maine.
And the legal outlook is very rocky for the administration. We have to remember, the Supreme Court has already ruled on this.
They have.
Yes. In the landmark case Massachusetts v. EPA, back in 2007, the court said that the EPA does have the authority under the Clean Air Act to regulate greenhouse gases if they are found to endanger public health.
So the Supreme Court already gave the green light. They said, yes, you can do this.
They did. And so revoking the finding now, after 17 years of it being the law of the land, is legally tenuous. It will face immediate and powerful challenges. Environmental groups like the Natural Resources Defense Council are already saying the science and the law are crystal clear. They are confident they can win in court.
But court cases take years. And in the meantime, the U.S. is stepping back from the world stage on this issue.
And that is the global context we absolutely cannot ignore. The U.S. is the second largest polluter right now, just behind China, but we are by far the largest historical emitter.
Right. We put most of that carbon up there over the last century.
We did. And now we are the only nation out of nearly 200 to withdraw from the Paris Agreement.
Everyone else is at the table trying to solve the problem, and we just flipped the table over and walked out of the room.
It sends a powerful signal. And the clock is ticking. The goal of the Paris Agreement was to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels.
1.5.
Scientists now expect that with current policies globally, we're on track to hit 2.6 degrees. That's 4.7 degrees Fahrenheit. And for you listening, that difference between 1.5 and 2.6 is not small. It is the difference between manageable change and truly catastrophic, irreversible tipping points.
Okay, so let's just try to sum this all up. We have a repeal of a scientific truth, the endangerment finding, which is being done to serve an economic agenda.
That's the claim.
But the economic data suggests consumers are actually paying higher prices for energy because of policies like LNG exports and coal cronyism. Meanwhile, the very real health risks from heat, from disease, from wildfire smoke are skyrocketing.
It is a massive contradiction. We are being told we can't afford to fight climate change, but the data strongly suggests we're already paying a premium to ignore it.
It really makes you wonder about the definition of endangerment. The administration says the EPA can only act if the danger is near the source.
Right, that narrow legal argument.
But we're talking about an atmosphere that wraps around the entire planet. The source of the problem is everywhere. The damage is everywhere.
And so, if the federal government steps back from regulating the very air we all breathe, based on this idea that damage must be near the source, what happens when the damage is, in fact, everywhere?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? And here's a final thought for you to chew on. If the endangerment finding is gone, strictly as a legal document on a piece of paper, does that mean the danger itself has actually vanished?
Of course not.
Or have we just destroyed our ability to see it coming? It feels like tearing down the lighthouse because you're tired of looking in the rocks. The rocks are still there.
And the ship is still moving full steam ahead right into the fog.
On that cheery note, we want to make sure you have the tools to understand what comes next, to stay on top of the weather and the science behind it, because clearly the politics of weather is getting just as stormy as the weather itself. Make sure you follow meteorologist Rob Jones.
You can find him on Instagram under the handle Meteorologist. It's simple enough to remember.
On TikTok, you can look for TV Meteorologist. And over on YouTube, follow the channel Rob Jones Hurricane. You can check out the Meteorology Matters playlist there for all our past conversations.
And please, if you found this discussion helpful today, take a second to like, follow, comment, and rate the podcast on whatever platform you're using. It really does help us get this information out to more people.
You've been listening to Meteorology Matters, created by meteorologist Rob Jones.
Thanks for listening. And remember, meteorology always matters.